I couldn't really see anything until I crested the valley at 7th Avenue. And that's when I saw the column of smoke. And that's when I knew it was going to be a bad day.
I don't think there's any member of the department that didn't at some point have it in the back of their heads that there could potentially be a fire at Pheasant Run.
At the time, I didn't really, it didn't hit me that this is the biggest fire that St. Charles has ever had.
Welcome to City Insider, where we have real conversations about the human side of public service. Here in the city of St. Charles, essential services like power, water, public safety, and emergency response are delivered around the clock to every home and business. And behind each of these vital services is a person and a story. I'm Kara Silva.
And I'm Lisa Garhan. We're the City of St. Charles communications team and hosts of the City Insider podcast.
Today, we're focusing on one of the most significant events in St. Charles history, the devastating fire at the former Pheasant Run Resort, the largest blaze we've ever experienced in the history of this city. In May 2022, more than 100 firefighters from 20 area departments came together to battle the weekend blaze at the former resort complex, a once beloved family gathering spot since the 1960s. It took 15 hours and 7 million gallons of water to bring the fire under control, and 3 full days to extinguish it. The fire wasn't just a multi-day spectacle. It was about the firefighters on the front lines, split-second decisions made under pressure, and the investigation that followed to uncover exactly what happened. Joining us to share their firsthand perspectives are 3 key leaders from that response. St. Charles Fire Department Battalion Chiefs Tony Centimano.
Good morning, Kara. Good morning, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Dave Chmelar.
Good morning.
And Lieutenant Joe Davila.
Good morning. Glad to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. First of all, thank you all for the work that you do and for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. So when you think about the Pheasant Run Resort fire, what's one word that comes to mind and why?
The one word that came to mind was monumental. It was because it was a once-in-a-generation event. I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but when was it going to happen?
I would say extraordinary. That's a once-in-a-career fire. You never see a fire that large in your career.
Long. Pulling out of the station and seeing the column of smoke, I knew that this was going to be an extended operation.
So can you take us back to that weekend in May 2022? How did the first call come in and what was the initial response like?
It was a weekend. There were multiple calls to 911. They were updating us on the way there. Coming from Station 1, being in the valley by the river, I couldn't really see anything until I crested the valley at 7th Avenue. And that's when I saw the column of smoke. And that's when I knew it was going to be a bad day.
Yeah, I think, as the call came in, I don't think there's any member of the department that didn't at some point have it in the back of their heads that there could potentially be a fire at Pheasant Run. So when the call came in, it was about, 4:30? It was towards the end of our work day. I mean, it was quiet in the engine because we kind of just if this thing turns out to be something, it's going to be a long day. Sure enough, approached production and Kirk Road. We saw the column of smoke, and we had the closest vantage point because we're the closest and first due engine company on that. And nothing needed to be said in the engine. We all saw it, and we knew it was going to be a long day. And as we got closer, our Battalion Chief Centimano upgrade the alarm before he'd even arrived on the scene. So from a different vantage point coming up East Main Street, it was going to be a long day, and it was going to be a tough fire to fight.
So when you actually got on scene and you saw the scale of the fire, what goes through your head at that point?
Well, as a first due company, even before we get into the apparatus, when the call comes out, you start thinking about things. And we were very well-versed on strategic plans and tactical options should this fire ever happen. And here we were. It was happening. So we had a long-standing order that because of the deterioration of the building, the structural members, we were not going to be going interior. So my first thought always goes to, how do I keep my guys safe? And then once we arrived on scene, we were met with instant challenges. There had been a fence erected around the entire property because Pheasant Run had turned into quite a TikTok, YouTube, urban myth, legend kind of location. So we'd been dealing with people going in and out of there, filming themselves, putting them on social media, and just wrecking the place even more. So knowing all these things, knowing the status of the building, the condition of the building, the challenges we were going to have accessing the building with the fencing, the overgrown bushes and everything else, all these things were kind of going through my head as we approached. And when we finally got there, sure enough, we had a decision to make. I had a decision to make. The fire had been it was well advanced by the time we got there, which was surprising to me because it was towards the end of the day. East Main Street's a very busy street. It wasn't cloudy. It was a sunny day. I mean, if you were anywhere in the vicinity, you could see the smoke. So it was pretty well advanced. by the time we got there. It was heading towards the east, towards the lobby area, and it was also heading towards the west. So we just took a position in the middle. I had about 2 seconds to make a decision. Do we want to try to save this end of the building or that end of the building? We attacked it right where it was at to try to prevent the spread going to the west, knowing that follow companies were right behind us. They were going to be there in minutes. Chief Centimano was going to make sure that we tried to cut it off where we could. That was my initial thought. That's a lot of things going through my head in literally a matter of a minute or two. But every company officer faces those challenges. It's the nature of the business. You have to make a million decisions in a very, very small time frame.
When we arrived, Chief Centimano was already on the scene, and he radioed to me, Engine 103, you have the lobby. We pulled up to the lobby, and it was fully engulfed. The entire lobby was on fire. I couldn't see past that to see what was going on past that as far as into the building.
When you say lobby, do you mean like hotel?
The underpass area where the lobby was.
Okay.
So that's where he said, you have the lobby, and immediately I thought the same thing. How am I going to cut this off to keep it from spreading? My thought, I knew Joe had the west end and I had the east end. And so my job was to keep it from going east.
So at that point, when you're initially starting to tackle putting out the fire, how many guys are we talking? Like how many people are actually part of
Early
this effort?
on, 12 guys.
As the first engine company on the scene, it was myself, the driver, and the backstep firefighter.
So 3 people.
And we deployed a 2.5-inch line. So it's a larger line for larger volumes of water, because we knew we needed to get big water on this. We already had big fire. It was well advanced. It was moving on us. We needed to try to at least keep it in check. I had ordered my guys to pull a 2.5-inch line, which it's no small task. Depending on the nozzle that you have on, or you can have anywhere from 250 gallons of water up to 450, 500 gallons of water, depending on what apparatus you have on the end of it. So we were working with a 2.5-inch fog nozzle, so about 250 to 275 gallons per minute. It's quite a lot to handle with 2 people. Again, right off the bat, we were challenged not only with making that initial tactical decision on how to initiate our operation, but then to affect that operation with the limited manpower that we had. It took a minute or two, but we got water on the fire relatively quickly.
What were the biggest challenges in battling a fire of this size at a site like Pheasant Run?
From my perspective as the incident commander, stopping the spread of fire, potential for squatters. Facility had kind of become a urban exploration site. There was only one security guard that was assigned there, whether he was inside or outside. Maintaining that defensive posture. Firefighters are aggressive naturally, so making sure that they stayed out, and then managing all of those people.
That's a good point. You can't go there and assume that it's a vacant building.
Right. Not to get ahead of it, but later in the evening, we found out that there were people there the night before. And then while we were actively fighting the fire, there were people accessing the site. They snuck in and were on rooftops. We had to actually have them removed.
Yeah, I remember actually we were going to Walmart, and Walmart was kind of like directly across the street, and there was quite a crowd that had gathered to see you guys put out the fire. And we just stumbled upon it ourselves. We were just like doing errands that day, and then we just couldn't help ourselves because it was just, I've never seen a fire that big in my life.
Probably for later in the show, but yeah, thank you to Walmart, because that's where we found our eventual arsonists.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get there. Yeah. We'll come back to that. Ooh, teaser. I like it. Everyone has to stay tuned for that little nugget.
With more than 100 firefighters from 20 different departments working together, how do you even coordinate and communicate effectively in such a high-pressure situation?
As a company officer, I'm only in charge of my small area. I'm just a piece of the puzzle to the bigger command, strategy and tactics. So for me, it was relatively easy. This was my quadrant. This was my task. This was my assignment. And this is what we did. I would say Tony definitely had the lion's share of the decision-making problem, if you will, with managing a huge incident like this with the amount of resources and people that were there.
My biggest help was not only just the company officers on scene, but I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention names, just in case they're listening. Battalion Chief Lucas from Batavia, Battalion Chief Picola from West Chicago, Chief Colucci from Melbourne, Chief Antonori from Geneva, and Assistant Chief Christensen. Those were the 5 guys who really, really made my job easier, what I would call a pretty good success. And I know I'm missing a lot of people, but Battalion Chief from Bloomingdale was very helpful in us securing water. Pheasant Run, sits on the edge of the city. Though it's robust, again, Tim Wilson from the water department, he was instrumental in trying to get us those 7 million gallons of water based on how much we were flowing at the time. Yeah, shout out to Tim and the water department for keeping us abreast of how much water we were using, how much we had left, and then trying to find options and then working towards those options. He had to contact the city of West Chicago to open up a shared valve to get us more water.
It's nice to have a shout out because I know there are a lot of different agencies involved in putting out this fire. And the teamwork was imperative.
And what was interesting about this fire is we had brought in communities that we don't typically work with because of the size of the incident. And we went to a third alarm on that one, I believe. There's a lot of behind the scenes heroes. And it's not just us putting water on the fire. There were a lot of entities involved that are non-fire department related, from PD keeping people away once they finally got established to the water department working, their own mutual aid, if you will, contacting West Chicago. We need water, and getting those two communities, public works departments, to work together to make sure that we have that water that we needed, because we were exhausting the city supply rather quickly. And it was becoming a concern, not only for the firefight, but for the rest of the community, because you still have to provide water to the community. So even to our EMA folks that were providing meals for us and just getting some of those logistical things that you don't see on the news, because there's a lot involved with structure fires. It's not just putting the water on the fire. It's having all those ancillary people helping you out. A lot of those people were very instrumental to the extinguishment of this fire.
So were there any other moments during the fire when you had to make especially tough split-second decisions?
I know I heard it. I know you guys heard it. There was an explosion that happened. Standing out front, up by Main Street in the parking lot, hearing that and understanding my role was to make sure that everybody was safe. There's a lot of radio traffic going on. Hearing that and then the dead silence on the radio, you could tell everybody was like, where did that come from? And everybody knew not to get on the radio unless they had some sort of information. And I was able to reach out to the safety officer, Chief Colucci, and then Chief Aunt Nori, who was working on what we call the seaside, but the backside of the resort, to figure out what it was and where it came from. That was probably 2 or 3 minutes of sheer terror for me, just to make sure that nobody got hurt. Nobody was involved in that explosion, because a hotel resort, what were we expecting to explode? I can only take a guess as to what it was. Early in the investigation, having the ATF guys and the state fire marshal guys out, we were able to walk the site after we kind of made it safe. And what we had discovered was a number of law enforcement agencies from local, state, and federal government had been using the site to train in. And what we believe was the explosion was maybe just some unexploded ordnance that they had used when they were doing some breaching training. That's our best guess. Totally unrelated, but yeah.
Another thing that would have been on Chief Centimano's plate at the time. Joe talked about being a company officer. You're given an order, and that's what your little task of this giant picture is. And at one point, I was on Division A, the Alpha side, the front of the building. We were hearing on the radio concerns about the tower on the Charlie side in the back and whether or not there was potential for that to collapse. Being in the front of the building, I have no vantage point to see that, especially with the flames and the smoke that were in the front. There was real concern. As a company officer, I was wondering what's going on in the back. So for him as the incident commander, that's got to just send you through the roof. What's going on in the back? Because he can't be everywhere at all times. So he's constantly having to reassess what's going on and what are my safety factors here? Is that truly a possibility? Do I need to back everybody out of the Charlie side of the building? Those are just things that I think as incident commander, he had his hands full. Where as a company officer, I got my group of people that I've got to oversee, but I don't have his.
The weight of responsibility for everyone on site.
And constantly changing, right? It's that unknown.
Absolutely. I can't say enough to Chief Colucci for bringing all of his years of experience to the table, instrumental in helping me get through this big event.
I'm just curious, when you're doing something like this, obviously you're in the zone, but is there like a level of fear that you're kind of battling against for your own life and safety? Can you kind of try to explain that a little bit to us? Do you feel like this might be my last day today? Like, is that level of extreme fear you're trying to harness? Or
as the incident commander, standing away from the incident to have that big picture, it wasn't so much about me worrying about my life. It was me worrying about the 100 lives that were there. I was 101. So I was worried about the 100 other firefighters that were there and making sure that they go home.
I think as a company officer, I put a tremendous amount of faith in the incident commander and the safety officers assigned to those incidents because, again, I have a primary focus in task. And we don't get tunnel vision, but we focus on our task with the mindset that our commanders are watching our backs. Right. And so, with all our education training classes that we take, incident command purposefully is supposed to be set further away from the incident so that you don't get too close and involved. You can get a whole picture of what's going on in its entirety. And the safety officer's role is to watch for things that could put a company in danger and prevent that from happening well before it can. My focus was my personnel and the people that I was assigned to work with. We had a longstanding order that nobody is to go in the building, nobody is to go onto the building. We knew the condition of the building, but some of these other departments were, let's just say they were getting antsy and they wanted to go interior. But you get emotional. You want to get in there. You want to do something. You want to try to do your part. And so the incident commander's role is to make sure everybody's on the same page, keep everybody even keel, watch our backs. And if somebody is doing something they're not supposed to, call it out. Hey, stop what you're doing. That's not safe. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. As a company officer, I take those orders and, again, I help enforce those orders because this was a huge scene. How you maintain span of control was pretty impressive. At one point, I think it wasn't until about 6 or 7 hours into the incident that I finally had a face-to-face with him. And I knew he was here. I could hear him on the radio. I had no idea where he was at because that's how big this scene was.
So there's a trust involved that kind of keeps you at ease.
Absolutely.
For this incident, you're outside the building. You're not inside doing interior firefighting where things could potentially go bad, whether it be a collapse or sudden explosion, something like that. And I think the three of us have probably all been in fires like that, whether they be residential or commercial fires, where you've come out of a fire and said that was a dicey one. That's one where you have to be at your best to make sure, because especially as company officers, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for them. Their safety is my job.
So we've kind of done a little bit of storytelling here and sharing anecdotes about our own, your own experiences. Something maybe we haven't touched on yet. Can you share a firsthand story that truly illustrates what it was like to be there? Take us through the physical sensations, the emotional state you were experienced in any particular moment, whatever comes to your mind.
I think for me, the enormity of it kind of hit me. This is actually kind of a funny story. During one of our breaks, I think we had burgers or something. We were refueling. I took a moment to just check my phone, and I had all kinds of messages on there. One of them was from my kid. My kid had said, "Hey, Dad, are you at that fire?" And so I texted her back. I'm like, "Yeah, we're all good. Everybody's safe. We're going to be here a while, but yes, we're good." "How did you hear about it?" He said, "Mom called and asked me about it." Well, my ex-wife was living in Oklahoma. This fire made the news in Oklahoma. She called my daughter to just make sure, "Hey, just check on your dad and make sure he's okay." And so she did. I understand the historical significance, and that's what drew a lot of people. In my honest opinion, people came out because this was a part of St. Charles history. What I didn't realize is how wide-reaching this story had made it throughout the country. That's when it hit me, the significance of the fire. This is nationwide news. Like, holy cow, we're a part of this. Let it sink in for a minute or two and then go back to work because it is what it is. We still got a job.
6 to 7 hours into the fire, I walked the entire scene, which was not an easy task to do. To have some FaceTime with responders, and then with those battalion chiefs and assistant chiefs that I'd put in charge of different areas. But at one point, in the old indoor-outdoor pool, I was standing on the pool deck, and I was looking back on everything, and it just kind of hit me as to how surreal this was. We knew this was going to happen. It was a matter of when, not if. By then, everybody was there and they were all working. And to see it from that vantage point, because we didn't have a lot of people back there because of the access issues, and to see it from back there and to take that moment and take it all in, it was, again, it was super surreal. But to hear yourself on somebody's video was pretty crazy too.
I remember being late in the evening. It was probably 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening. It was a third level alarm. We had 100 plus firefighters on the scene. And we were in one of our breaks. We were laying in the parking lot, all three of us, using our helmets and our coats as pillows, just trying to get some physical rest. I mean, we had been there fighting fire for 7 hours. And I propped myself up and I looked across the parking lot, and there were dozens of firefighters doing the same thing, laying in the parking lot, trying to get some rest. And I thought to myself, this is a historic event. This is the biggest fire I've ever been involved with At the time, I didn't really, it didn't hit me that this is the biggest fire that St. Charles has ever had.
For the listeners, I mean, it sounds kind of odd. Dozens of firefighters laid out in the parking lot. What are they doing? There was never a point where anybody wasn't in the quote unquote fight. They were taking that quick rest and they were right back to it, doing the tasks that they were doing. Nobody was disengaged from this fire. It was an amazing thing to see 100 people all working together for the purpose of getting this fire under control.
Tony, you've touched on this a little bit, but Pheasant Run was more than just a resort for the St. Charles community. It was a landmark. How did it feel to fight that fire at a place that held so many memories for the residents of St. Charles?
From my vantage point, and I wrote down a couple of highlights. 1994, my senior breakfast was held there. 2015, our 20th high school reunion was held there. 2018, I was the convention chair for the Associated Firefighters of Illinois Biennial Convention. At that point, 21 years of fire inspections and incidents at the resort. Yeah, it was definitely, wow, this is an end of an era here.
I have memories of going there. It was a getaway for my family, and they had a pool. So we would do that in the winter. And my parents would take us, and we'd get to swim. And so I have memories that far back. I went with friends to Zany's, played golf there. It really didn't click when I was in the middle of it. But when we were wrapping up, I was like, this is an end of an era.
Once the flames were out, what were the first steps in the investigation, and what evidence do you look for in a fire of this magnitude?
I think this is where we can bring Walmart back into the discussion. It did take about 3 days to get everything fully extinguished, but by then it was totally under control. I started thinking about towards the investigation. That investigation, I have to say, thanks to the state fire marshal's office, Mitch Kushner. He's retired, but Mitch was instrumental in helping us navigate a lot of things, along with the ATF. They had 2 agents, one from Downers Grove, one from Rockford. They were helping us assess whether people from all over the country were going to help us put this together. It was the one of the ATF guys, not necessarily a fire investigator. I think he was a bomb guy. He actually traveled around to the Target, the BMO Bank, and the Walmart. He looked through, I don't know how many hours of video footage from all of the different angles and all of the different cameras that footage was provided to them. The break came from the Walmart cameras. Then we correlated that with some other stuff that we had found, and we were able to not necessarily identify them at that moment, but that was instrumental because it put them in a place right around the time that the fire had started. We were able to take the footage from Target to see them from a distance accessing the property and then coming back to their vehicle. Huge shout out to law enforcement, DuPage County State's attorneys, St. Charles Police Department, and the entire team that came together. I think our investigation took 10 days to kind of get all the information collected. Obviously, it was a lot longer than that, see it through into the courts, but I want to say we were out there for 10 days. Elgin Police Department brought out their drone. They were actually able to 3D map the entire site.
There was so much destruction in the building. We had a lot of physical evidence, but it was tough to sort through it because it was so far gone. Decided to go over to the Volkswagen. So we had an idea when we were doing our physical investigation of the site, what we thought maybe was an area of origin. With that much destruction, we really didn't know. Checked those videos, and at one point, the front of the building, you saw a little wisp of smoke to the right of the lobby. This fire was fast moving and confirmed by the video because it went from a wisp of smoke to a plume of smoke in literally a minute. That video footage was invaluable. It got us pointed in the right direction.
For all you kids listening, it's not worth it. Your social media is forever. That's exactly how we were able to place the teenagers at the facility at the time. They made videos of their escapades and shared them on one of the social media apps. There was a lot of things going on there because we were looking at a lot of different people and a lot of different causations and fairly decent amount of cell phone traffic in and around the area right at the time of the fire.
I would say with the investigation as well, you can't just immediately assume someone must have come in here and lit this. We all have a suspicion, but you have to rule out the other stuff too. So early on, there was a storm in the area and lightning strikes the night before. So we started going down that avenue, and it was plotting lightning strikes. And you had 2 avenues you had to follow, and you have to disprove one. You can't just go with one and not follow up with the other.
From a company officer standpoint, I'm not an investigator. You always have to also consider, where has this fire been? Where is it going? You have to at least consider that, because part of our role is not just extinguishment, try to preserve as much evidence as we can for the investigators when we shift into the investigation mode. One of the first things I did, because we were coming in off of North Avenue, is I picked up my phone. I had it on the dash. I snapped a bunch of pictures. And I knew that this was going to be a incident that required extensive investigation for the amount of fire that was there when we showed up, the time of day that it came in. Again, knowing the building, we had pre-planned it. We have done tactical surveys. We knew the sprinkler system was non-existent. It was shut down. Holes in the pipe. There was no water in any sprinkler system. The fire alarm had been shut down years prior. I wanted to make sure I tried to preserve what I saw in that first 30 seconds so that the investigators can use that as another tool for them to figure out what happened.
Chris Thomas, who just recently retired as a firefighter, he was the lead investigator for the St. Charles Fire Department. And he immediately started taking pictures, and not just of the building, but of the bystanders and the area around it, because we do get those arsonists that like to hang out and watch. Who knew if the perpetrator was there? But if he was, and he was standing there, Chris had a picture of him. So all those little things that Chris did, great job on his part. And he was our initial liaison with all the outside agencies, ATF, OSFM. So he's the one that made the contacts. He's the one that repeatedly spoke with them. He's the one that did all the legwork on, interviews and looking at footage with PD and ATF. So shout out to Chris. Great job.
Are there aspects of tackling this fire and conducting the investigation that help the department learn and prepare or train for a future incident?
I think it helped everybody appreciate fire spread from a firefighting aspect. And then the need for having mitigation strategies, keeping up on those things. When the resort closed shortly after COVID in 2020, a lot of those systems got shut down. And actually, when the fire occurred, they had no electricity to the building. They had no gas, no water. So all the utilities had been shut down. That might have changed the makeup of this entire thing.
Since the fire, I've been assigned to the Fire Prevention Bureau as a fire code official for the last 2.5 years now. And this fire really does reside in the back of my head. Just because a building is vacant doesn't mean fires don't happen. It's important for the Fire Prevention Bureau, the fire department, and the city as a whole to make sure that all entities that are involved with code enforcement are doing their jobs to make sure that we don't have a repeat of Pheasant Run, and make sure that the bare minimum is being done, but those bare minimums are going to prevent the scope and size of a fire like Pheasant Run. We were fortunate with Pheasant Run. We had one minor injury on the fire department side, but we didn't have any civilian injuries or deaths. That could have had a completely different outcome should somebody had been seriously hurt or killed. Again, cost is cost, and I understand we live the times that we live in, but it is a minimal cost to maintain those minimum requirements, life safety requirements, because it's all geared towards not having somebody get hurt, killed, or maimed because of somebody else's irresponsibility or negligence.
What do you wish the average person understood about the reality of fighting fires, especially one this large?
That fires can be prevented. Curiosity is not a reason to explore with fire setting, vacant buildings, or putting those two together. And that when we go out and do fire inspections, both for firefighters and for the public, it's not a reason for the city to interfere in their business, okay? It's actually a partnership. We use our vast wealth of information, history, and experience to keep you in business. That's the whole point of a fire inspection. And having those human interactions with business owners and explaining, hey, I'm only here to make sure that you stay in business. That's really what it is. If you have a fire, can you afford that? Whether you have an insurance policy or not, can you afford to be closed? Can your employees afford for you to be closed? We're here for your vitality. That's really what it is.
For us, we don't look at it as taking extraordinary risks to do what we do. We're trained. We all chose to get into this calling for a reason, because we want to serve other people. We want to help. Our day is filled with training, with inspections, with pre-planning, running calls and incidents, physical fitness, mental fitness now. We don't just fight fires. We're all paramedics as well. And then on top of that, we have our specialties. We have investigators. We have hazardous materials. Our battlefield has changed. Simple things such as how furniture is made today versus 20 years ago has changed completely how we approach our strategies, our tactics. There's just so many things going on behind the scenes that if you're not trained and in this profession, you're not aware of. We're not superheroes. We're regular human beings. You're going to call 911, but don't waste our time, because somebody else in the community really might need that help. Keep that in mind when you call us for help. We're here to help you, and we're going to help you. Doesn't matter what the call is, who you are. we're going to be there. Just remember we're humans too.
To the outside, the untrained eye, that may look like complete chaos, but it truly isn't. It is a coordinated effort of multiple agencies working towards the same goal. And it doesn't have to be a fire as big as Pheasant Run. It can be a regular house fire or, a commercial fire. There is a plan in place, and it's driven by the incident commander. I just don't want the public to think that we show up and we are winging it, so to speak, because that does not happen.
So before we wrap it up, is there anything any of you would like to add about the biggest fire in St. Charles history?
The sheer amount of support that this community gives to its fire department, from our elected leaders and our city administrator, Heather McGuire, our fire chief, Jayme, we get a tremendous amount of support. We have best trained firefighters. We have the best equipment, and that helps us succeed as a fire department. The biggest shout out is to the community. I mean, they are around. They are interested. They appreciate when we get here. They send cookies. They wave to us going down the street. They interact with us. So yeah, it's truly awesome to work in a profession that brings you so much satisfaction individually, but then to see how the community throws and lends their support to you is absolutely amazing.
Well, for our final question, and one that we ask all of our guests, as leaders in high-pressure situations, is there a mantra, a guiding principle, or personal philosophy that you follow to help keep you grounded?
Being that calm in chaos sets the stage for everybody.
Everybody goes so.
We got each other's back. We're family. We have a unique career where you will spend the next minimum 20 years working side by side with somebody. We're not coworkers. We're not peers. We're family. And so we watch each other's back every single day. On duty, off duty, doesn't matter.
Well, that about wraps it up. Thank you, Tony Centimano, Dave Chmelar, and Joe Davila for sharing your experiences and reflections on this major event in our city's history. Very much appreciate you being here.
Stay tuned for our next segment, Inside City Hall, where we talk with Ward 2 Alderpersons Jayme Muenz and Ryan Bongard to find out more about winning Ward 2. In this segment, Inside City Hall, we introduce our listeners to the people elected to serve St. Charles. They are residents of the community chosen to lead our city and help shape its future. St. Charles City Council includes 10 alderpersons, 2 from each of the city's 5 wards. 2 alderpersons from each ward are elected to represent their ward on the City Council and serve staggered 4-year terms. City Council is responsible for establishing policy, passing ordinances, and adopting the budget.
Today we are discussing Ward 2. So welcome Ward 2 Alderpersons Jayme Muenz and Ryan Bongard.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi, good to have you. So Ward 2 is generally located in the northeast portion of the city and is home to residential areas and amenities like the Norris Recreation Center, Redling Middle School, St. Charles East High School, and several commercial and retail businesses, including the former Charlestown Mall and the new Fox Haven Square development. So before we talk about your ward, let's get to know each of you a little bit better. Ryan, you are a longtime resident of St. Charles, have served as alderperson since 2021, and are a former board member of St. Charles Baseball. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My wife and I have lived on the east side of town in the 2nd Ward for all of these 16, 17 years. We have 4 sons in 4 different schools, 2 high schoolers, 1 in middle school, and a very, very loud kindergartner. If I'm not at, City Hall, City Council, typically you can find me at one of the practice fields, football, baseball, basketball, with all these kids in sports. In my day job, I am the managing partner for a small private equity company that does a lot of work with small businesses, which is great. And it's been a blast serving on City Council since 2021 and really looking forward to the next 4 years.
So Jayme, you also have called St. Charles home for many years. You've been a Ward 2 alderperson since 2023 and have always been very active in the community, from volunteering with the St. Charles Women's Club to sitting on the board of St. Charles Education Foundation. So what else would you like people to know about you?
I have lived here for a very long time. I've lived in 2 different wards in St. Charles in the last 22 years that we've lived here. So we moved in with no kids and 1 dog. And since then, we've gotten 2 other dogs. And we've had 2 children, moved wards. I've moved from Ward 1 to Ward 2. I've volunteered with more organizations than I can keep up with on my resume. But I don't do it for that. I really get a lot out of being involved in different parts of the community. And I do a lot of those things behind the scenes because I enjoy giving back, but I also enjoy helping keep those organizations afloat. You sort of notice when you do that it's the same few people that raise their hand for those organizations and make them run behind the scenes. So when I did run for office, I had to give up a few of those to have the time. And it was really tough because I knew that it would be hard to fill those spots. So trying to wrangle people to raise their hands. It's one of those things that I wish more people would do is just give a few hours, even just a few hours a year, back to different organizations in the community to help them run, because it's really what makes the city hum is those volunteer organizations. But aside from that, my day job, I work as an HR manager for a large company. I do that from home. So I'm very lucky because it allows me to balance my work and my life. I have 2 teenagers. One is in college and actually also in the U.S. Army. And my daughter is a senior at St.Charles East High School. And so we're always out and about and running to and from activities or meetings or out in a park or on my bike somewhere in the neighborhood or volunteering somewhere.
So Ryan, you serve in a special capacity as chair of the Government Services Committee. What does that committee do and what is your role?
Government services is incredibly important, but not necessarily always the most flashy or exciting. So think about your utilities, right? So anything, water, sewer, electrical that goes into ensuring that the city runs efficiently, runs the right way. That's what government services is. As chair, I'm more or less responsible for directing traffic and making sure that committee members' questions are answered, that people are spending time on the topics that they want to get to, and just making sure that staff and our public works departments are getting what they need from council and vice versa.
So Ryan, you also serve on a couple other commission liaison positions and also on the Fox River Dam Joint Task Force. You want to tell us about some of those other responsibilities?
When I was first elected in 2021, I was appointed to the St. Charles Business Alliance. So I sit on that commission as a liaison. The Business Alliance is a really, really great group that works directly with our business community on behalf of the city, doing marketing, doing events. It's a really, really great collection, staff, strategy, et cetera, that normally for small businesses are really hard to tap into those resources. It's a great organization to be able to sit a part of and represent council and help share updates on the city and direction and just help prioritize strategy. So I was lucky enough 2021 to be appointed to that and still sitting on that today. In terms of the Fox River Dam Joint Task Force, if we go back a couple of years, any municipality that sits along the Fox River that had a dam was basically engaged by IDNR and Army Corps of Engineers with the question of, potentially taking out the dam and what you wanted to do. Our previous administration, previous council thought the best thing to do would be to put together a task force to really explore what does it mean if we take the dam out? What does it mean if you keep it? What are the impacts environmentally, economically? Obviously the river coming right through, St. Charles and the dam play a huge part of, who we are as a community and the city at large. So the task force is really put in place to try and explore these questions. We have a long way to go still. That is a mouthful of the Fox River Dam Task Force, but I'm happy that we're taking the time to try and go through this as diligently as we can.
Jayme, you've been appointed vice chair of the Planning and Development Committee, and you also serve on other commissions with the city. So give us a little information about that.
So the Planning and Development Committee is responsible for moving forward all of the development projects and just general projects that go on in the city before they move forward to the city council for final approval. The vice chair's responsibility in that is having a little bit of input on the agenda, and I would fill in anytime the chairperson is unable to conduct those meetings. I also make the motions to approve omnibus items on the agenda, and omnibus items are things that don't require any kind of discussion by the committee, so things that are just standard business or below a certain dollar amount, just to move those things forward. Our council members are also assigned to different commissions and committees. One of mine is being on the 708 Mental Health Board, so I'm a voting member of that. And then I also sit as a liaison on the River Corridor Foundation and have sat on both of those since 2023. I also do participate in a lot of Chamber of Commerce events in order to better understand the new businesses that are coming in as well as the existing businesses. And I've sat in on a lot of the Business Alliance meetings for the same purpose, because it's really important to me to understand how commerce works in the city. It's really helped me understand the connection between our businesses and the community.
That mental health board is an important one too, because I know, I think our first episode was talking about mental health with first responders, but I just think it's so cool that the city has had that dedicated to serve those organizations.
Absolutely. So it's something that not a lot of residents know about. And St. Charles is unique, very unique in the area, because a lot of mental health boards are governed or run by their township. And in St. Charles, it is run by the city. It is a special taxing body. And what we do is we pull in a percentage of the taxes to then allocate to professional mental health agencies. So our board essentially decides how the funding is allocated, and it is sent out to those agencies to then spread among them to fund and resource the people within our community. What I really like about the board that is appointed by our mayor, these folks are looking at the applications that come in. They're basing the decisions on some very defined metrics, several mental health professionals that sit on our board. We really do look at, what is this organization serving? Are they serving? How many people from our population are they serving? And what greater good are they providing? Instead of the city doling out money willy-nilly to an organization at different times of the year, or maybe not prioritizing mental health, which is definitely something that some cities don't take the opportunity to do. St. Charles has done that for a very long time. And it is something that has to be done through legislation, which is why it is called the 708 Mental Health Board. So there was I might get this wrong as far as what the actual act was, but I believe it is a number, state statute 708, but that is the number that is attached to that particular mental health initiative. So you will see those across the state. But again, most of those are township run, and the city has the ability to do that for St. Charles. So I think it's a really fantastic thing that we have here.
There's such a focus on mental health now, but it seems like St. Charles is really ahead of its time to be thinking about mental health decades ago when they started this. So that's great.
Thank you all for letting us learn a little bit about you both. Let's bring Ward 2 into the conversation and give you some time to brag about your ward. Jayme, tell us a little bit about what makes Ward 2 so special.
Well, for me, I think it always comes down to the people, because, each ward has a different dynamic and different geography and unique challenges and, planning and development perspectives. But it always comes down to really the people that make each area special. And for me, I feel like I've been very lucky to meet so many incredible people over the past few years who I might not have had that opportunity to encounter if I hadn't been in this role. We have a lot of really generous residents. I knew that when I moved into the neighborhood I'm in today from the other side of town in Ward 1. And that was a great neighborhood too. Moving on to my street, we have a meal train that we do where our residents have a ongoing sign up where we do lunches for Lazarus House every month. Down the block in another part of the neighborhood, we had a situation where there was a retirement of a longtime UPS driver that someone found out about, and they did a collection and a special surprise retirement party for her with this big bouquet of flowers and a big retirement gift for her. And it was just a big neighborhood surprise where everyone showed up. And it seems like anytime somebody needs something, whether there's a need for information, a need for help, questions that need to be answered, and there's a call to action, people in this ward step up and they step forward. We have a lot of veterans in our neighborhood, and I see those people step forward. The dynamic of people and how they want to be a part of our community, I find it to be unique and special, and how they relate to the rest of St. Charles, I think is a pretty phenomenal thing.
Ryan, what's the most frequent question or comment you get from Ward 2 residents, and what's the best way for them to contact you?
The second ward, the east side of town, in the last, let's say 4 or 5 years, has gone through some positive development. We had a lot of empty storefronts. You had a lot of vacancy. The questions and conversations were always around, what's going on? Why can't we get more activity? So probably the most frequent comment question that I get now is they're very happy with the development, the investment. Obviously, we're still looking for what the future holds for Charlestown Mall. The good news is there's been a lot of positive momentum recently. And people can go to the city's website, I think, and start to see some more of the details about that. But probably the biggest question, comment is what's coming next, and they're excited. With all that positive momentum here over the last couple of years is obviously this question around traffic. Unfortunately, when we look at how the city was laid out or the development and growth in the last 20 or so years, it wasn't probably designed or laid out the way that you would do it if you have some of these things going in. So that's been a little bit of a juggling act of how do we make sure that people can safely get from point A to point B, or how do you handle the spike in traffic that you have for people coming to, say, Foxhaven Square or just the retail that's going up. So with any good development or positive momentum, there's going to be some trade-offs. So still working through that. But the overarching comments or questions are in a very positive kind of what's coming next. And people are happy, with the direction that East Side and the Second Ward is headed. In terms of the best way for people to contact us, I always say email us at the city because there's a paper trail, right? And it's, if for some reason something doesn't get answered, missed, it's always there. That's typically the best way.
I would agree with Ryan that email is probably best for the same reasons that he said, because it also helps us when we receive questions that we're not the subject matter experts in. We have to go to staff or other people. It helps us to be able to send those on. We don't mind people that have our phone number that want to send us a message or give us a call. That's obviously, perfectly fine. But the emails are a lot easier for us to manage so that we can send those on. We are online. We are on Facebook. We do check those. It's not as frequent. So, neither one of us is on Facebook all day, every day. We do get people that tag us in things sometimes, either on our personal pages or we both have, alderman pages. And we don't discourage that either. Just understand that the city email is really the official way to reach us and the best way to get your questions answered in the most official and efficient way.
So, Jayme, is there an interesting fact, historic note, or bit of trivia that people should know about Ward 2?
Well, a lot of the history that we seem to focus on in St. Charles, it centers around our downtown. And there is a lot that has changed in the area that is currently the Second Ward. And much of that is in the area right around where I'm at. A great example that we have is one of the largest land grant sites that was provided by Delora and Lester Norris in our ward. And that's where St. Charles East High School currently sits. And with that donation on our city's eastern expansion might look vastly different if we hadn't received that, because we wouldn't have expanded out to the areas that we're at. I think that's why so many of the buildings at that school have the name Norris in them. And it does make a wonderfully interesting adventure when you're trying to direct people on what to go to, whether it's the Norris Recreation Center or the Norris Arts Center, the Norris Sports Center. It is definitely a great tribute to them for the wonderful gift that they gave us. And what some people are not aware of that are not from here or did not grow up in the area or know it at this time, but the school, when it was built in 1977, had solar panels on the roof, and that was supplying a portion of the energy needs for the school, and it made St. Charles a pioneer in that space.
And for the final question, and one that we end on for all our guests, do you each have a personal philosophy or guiding principle that shapes the way you lead St. Charles?
I've always been of the belief people agree on about 80% of things: financial, safety, development. So I really try and focus in on the fact that the majority of people, when they're talking about an issue, a project, that they want the same thing. And the disagreement tends to come with, maybe the path in which you go to getting there. Trying to keep that, whether it's a policy decision that's facing the council or potential development, that we all want the same things, that we're all trying to strive for, the best for St. Charles. But just kind of keeping that at your center helps also keep people grounded a little bit when they might get frustrated, because ultimately you believe that you're heading in the same direction. If you kind of keep that at your core, that, the majority of us agree on, shared values, shared principles. We might just disagree on which way to go. That has worked, and it's been really helpful.
Couldn't agree more with what Ryan said. And I would add to that I look at what my why was for why I ran for office and why I give back to the community, which are kind of the same reasons. And it's that I'm looking to build a city and create an environment in this city that I want my children to come back to when they want to build families. It's what drew me to St. Charles is the community that we have. So I'm not looking to create something that didn't already exist, but just to maintain that and make sure that we continue to have this great dialogue in our city and people that have different opinions and different ideas, but that we're also, honoring our own differences along with that. Another piece of that is also asking people to be engaged. Come to meetings, voice your opinions. We are the closest and most accessible type of government that you have available to you. We'd love to see more people come into our meetings and talk to us about what you'd like to see and how you'd like to see the community change, evolve, improve. You're not going to find an easier way to get a hold of people than you will with your city council. It's pretty hard to get a hold of state senators and congressmen, but it's not hard to find your aldermen because they live in your neighborhoods. And you can find us jogging down the street, walking our dogs at the grocery store. You can come to our meetings and you can watch them on Zoom. You can go to the YouTube channel. And when you need something, writing us letters and sending us emails and coming and standing at the podium and looking us in the eye and saying, I'd like some more bike lanes, or I'd like to make it safer to get my kids across the street to school. It makes a big difference and it's impactful. I encourage you to get involved and come up and ask a question once in a while and get your neighbors behind you to do those things, and you'll make a bigger difference than you could even imagine.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Alderpersons Jayme Muenz, Ryan Bongard, thank you for joining us today and sharing information about the 2nd Ward with our listeners.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of City Insider, the limited series podcast where we explore the human side of public service in the city of St. Charles. Thanks to the St. Charles Public Library for the use of their sound studio, and thank you for listening.